Harvard and Stanford, two of the biggest names in the college business. Last week, I shared my story on how I got into Harvard and I showed my resume, my personal statement. And this week, we're going to be covering Stanford. So roughly around 3 weeks ago, I was accepted into the Stanford Graduate School of Education to study a master's in learning design and technology. For those of you who haven't heard of the program before, it's essentially centered around education technology, and it has an acceptance rate extremely low. They accept roughly, I believe it's 18 people every single year from across the world. So extremely grateful to have been accepted at 23 years old. And what I want to do this week is cover how I got into it. What was my personal statement? What were the kind of extracurriculars that I did? And also what my supplemental question answers? Because Stanford is very unique in the sense that it asks very wacky and weird supplemental questions. So my goal is just to give you guys that information so that when you apply in the future, you'll have a better chance of getting in. For those of you that are new here, my name's Jack Anderson. I'm from Perth, Western Australia. And my goal with this channel is just to share as much knowledge as I can about all the colleges and scholarships that I've applied for and that I've been through the ringer with so that it can make your lives easier. So in the coming weeks, I'm going to be going into a lot of detail about how I got into Harvard, but also Penn and Columbia on scholarships. And then also diving into the huge international scholarships that I've been finalists for. So things such as the Rhodes, the Fulbright, the Monash, the Harvard Menzies, the Frank Knox, all of those types of scholarships. I'm hoping to really just give all that information out for free to make your guys' lives a lot easier than what it was for me. With that in mind, let's just get stuck into Stanford. So Stanford has a few different requirements in regards to my personal statement. So there is the statement of purpose, which is 1,000 words. So a little bit shorter than the Harvard one. The Harvard one gives you 1,500 words. So you've got to be very concise with your Stanford one. It also has the opportunity to speak on your honors and awards, your publications. Of course, submit a resume. I would suggest about 3 pages. And then there's more of the supplemental questions, which I think is where the value will be really found in this video. So there's the contribution to community. I think that's a really important one that I'll cover. You get 500 words to talk about how you want to contribute to Stanford. And then 2 other supplementals that are centered around what would your ideal program look like? And then also what intrigues you about the design of digital tools for learning. So that's very program specific, but I'm guessing if you're going to be applying to some form of a program, they will ask you, like, why are you passionate about the area? What is your ideal program going to look like? And how do you plan to contribute? So hopefully you can gain a lot of inspiration from this video. I'm not going to go through my resume. I did that in the previous Harvard video, which you can find here. But I'm just going to quickly chuck up my resume that I applied for Stanford. They're all pretty universal. So I'll just put the 3 pages here and you can screenshot those. You can have a read through it. So I want to quickly start with something easy. I want to ease us into this. Before we go into the personal statement, I'm just going to go through the honors and awards and my publications and stuff, just to give you a little bit of background of myself. So I'll chuck up a screenshot now of the honors and awards that I wrote down. They give you the opportunity to write down 6, but I had a ton of others that I tried to fill out between my resume and the options that they gave you on the application. So got first class honors for my engineering degree, which in Australia is just like the highest honors. It's basically if you just get above 80%. And then essentially everything else is just to do with non-profit leadership or community service. So I've been fortunate enough to win a few awards. I don't think that's what makes your application, to be honest. I think your actual experience and your personal statement is really what matters. So I'll just quickly finish racing through these. I also published 6 books, so I've just screenshotted those there. It was through my non-for-profit. I helped to co-author all of these publications, and some of the earlier ones I pretty much authored by myself. And then research experience. So I'd done research for my honours year. I did at the School of Environmental Engineering for Western Australia, and then I did some graduate school research at the Grad School of Education, also at my local university. So that's a chance for you to read those through. But to be honest, what I feel is though, for a program that has such a small acceptance rate of roughly 18 people, they're not looking for the most accomplished people. Like, I'm 23 years old, and to be truthful, I haven't done all that much. Like, relative to someone who's 40 years old and owns their own investment bank, or who has worked at McKinsey or any big consulting firm, or is the CEO of some big company, I pale in comparison to them. Like, I've literally just studied my honors degree and then said, hey, I want to come study at Stanford. So For me, what it really comes down to is the personal statement and the supplementals. So I'm just going to start with my personal statement. Read through it, gain inspiration, use what you will. Obviously, I'm going to redact certain parts just because it's extremely personal to me, especially in the first half. But how I structured my personal statement is I started extremely personal, as you're going to see. The first roughly 500 words is just about my life. It has nothing to do with my professional experiences. Then I have a paragraph summarizing my professional experiences. Then I go into what I want to do with what are my ambitions for my life. That's the third thing. And then finally, how is Stanford going to help me to achieve those ambitions? So a pretty stock standard personal statement structure, but I think the way in which I went about it is pretty unique. You're going to notice for the first 4 paragraphs, I started with the words, it's nothing, every single time to kind of segue that I'm talking about a new point in my life, a new experience that links back to education. So let's just get started. Also, just something pretty underrated, but have a good heading for you. So mine just says Statement of Purpose, Jack Anderson, transforming a system that fails millions of Australian students. Just very simple, but it's good to title what you're writing about and make it look really nice. It's nothing personal, but my Australian high school was not for me. I sat subserviently still for 5 days a week and found it impossible to pay attention to my teacher's monotone recitals for more than 10 minutes at a time. As a result, I taught myself at night through the online learning platform Khan Academy. Listening to the engaging voice of Sal Khan in his free education videos empowered me to thrive in school and inspired the work I do today, supporting tens of thousands of young Australians. So, talking about my negative school experience in a very brief manner and just talking about my own personal issues within school. In other personal statements, I go a lot deeper, but this has a very short word count. And then just a subtle flex at the end, just kind of saying that I do work with young Australians and trying to have a very subtle professional link. Now it goes to the next paragraph, a new experience. It's nothing Australia seems to be ashamed of, but socioeconomic status is one of our strongest determinants of educational attainment. In my first year of university, I mentored a class of Year 10 students from a low socioeconomic school just 20 kilometers outside of Perth, and I asked them, who here believes they can go to university? Out of 30 students, only 2 put their hands up. So in Australia, socioeconomic status is one of our strongest determinants of success. If you come from a low socioeconomic background, statistically, you're going to be 3 years of learning behind someone from a high socioeconomic background. And if you're from rural, it's even worse. So Australia has a highly inequitable education system, and I'm just making a comment on that based on my own experiences. And then the next paragraph I'm going to skip over, but essentially it talks about my mental health. It starts with, it's nothing Australian schools seem to care about, but high school failed my mental health. And I go into some pretty deep experiences and link it to my graduate school of education research in a very concise manner. I don't want to go into it too much just because this is the internet and it's probably not where I feel comfortable sharing that at the moment, but hopefully that gives you a very good idea. So first, 300, 400 words has nothing to do with any of my professional experiences, but I'm just trying to engage the reader. And now we're going to go into my professional experience and cover it in a very concise manner. This took me a while to craft and to get right, but I managed to pretty much summarize everything that's important to me in one paragraph. It's nothing our education policymakers seem to be doing anything about, but millions of Australian students are just like me and the low socioeconomic students I mentored. As a 6-time co-author and the co-founder of one of Australia's largest edtech non-for-profits, Elucidate Education, I have worked tirelessly to support more than 100,000 students by giving them equitable access to the textbooks, online content, and educational videos they need to succeed in school. So touching on the non-for-profit that I created and also my book publications. Additionally, as a life skills educator, I have published my own non-fiction book called Realizing Dreams, made countless life education films, and taught thousands of students essential social emotional skills through giving school speeches. However, these efforts only scrape the surface of my ambitions for giving millions of young Australians access to more equitable and holistic education opportunities. So a very brief summary of the types of things that I've accomplished. Again, your resume is going to speak to your accomplishments. The personal statement is the place in which you do need to get personal. It's about striking the balance, I would say. You still need to touch on your professional accomplishments. And a lot of people will do experience and then tie it to a professional thing, and then experience and tie it to something professional. But coming from Australia, being 23 years old, I wanted to create a format that's quite unique. So I just had pure personal, then a very brief touch on professional, and now I'm going to focus on my ambitions because the strength of my application doesn't come from my plethora of experiences because I don't have that. It comes from my ambitions and my ability to understand how the course is going to help me to achieve those. My ambitions are to develop 2 nationwide EdTech initiatives that will significantly advance Australia's education equity and holistic education efforts. My first EdTech initiative aims to expand Elucidate Education, my non-for-profit, Australia-wide to provide our 750,000 Year 10, 11 and 12 students with free access to all the textbooks, online content, educational videos and assessment software they need to succeed in school. My second EdTech initiative aims to build a nationwide life education curriculum that will be freely available on the Elucidate Education platform. To do this, I plan to collaborate with leading experts in social emotional learning to create engaging videos and online content that will equip millions of young Australians with the knowledge they need to thrive beyond school. Okay, one of the biggest strategies for writing a good personal statement, in my view, is clarity. And I think the one thing that I started to discover as I did draft after draft after draft is that there's no harm in just having bullet points of what your ambitions are. I think if you can concisely convey what you want to do in 1 or 2 bullet points, like having this is initiative 1, this is initiative 2, it's a great way to go about it. The other approach, in which I didn't do, but I know is another great approach, is just saying my short-term ambitions are this and my long-term ambitions are this. And just having 2 paragraphs touching on that. Or you can do short, medium, long-term. But I think the dot points are very clear. It's like when they're assessing me and trying to remember my application, they can just come back to those 2 bullet points and be like, cool, this is what that young man's going to try and achieve if we take a bet on him, if we accept him into our program. Now the rest of this is going to be, I think, extremely valuable for you guys. The first half is not as valuable just because it's to do with my life and it's a very personal aspect. Like, you can't have the same ambitions as me, you can't have the same upbringings as me because you're a completely different person. So you're going to have to tailor that to your own needs. But this back half just touches on the program and how it ties back to my ambitions. And hopefully you can see how I've gone about doing that, how I've gone about researching the course, the professors I want to work with, the programs, the things that I want to get involved in, the research facilities, everything else. So I really spent a long time understanding the program and slowly evolving it and tying it back to my ambitions. So let's now go into the back half of this personal statement. The MS in Learning Design and Technology at the Stanford Graduate School of Education is undoubtedly the best program in the world to empower me to achieve my EdTech ambitions. For expanding Elucidate Education Australia-wide, I believe the combination of the Master's Project, professional internship, and learning design coursework are the perfect experiences I need to become capable of achieving this. For my Master's Project, I plan to explore how I can redesign my digital resources at Elucidate Education to be equity responsive, to provide targeted support to marginalised Australian students from Indigenous, low socioeconomic and rural backgrounds. To build these inclusive resources, I am excited for the full circle moment of taking an internship at the world's largest EdTech non-for-profit that inspired the work that I do today, Khan Academy. This internship will allow me to uncover the design principles and learning frameworks they have used to design resources that are inclusive, engaging, and fun for the 100 million students they support annually. So this is actually a really cool full circle moment. At the start of my personal statement, I spoke about how Khan Academy helped me through school. And since Khan Academy is located in California in that Silicon Valley area, I figured that I could do an internship there because that's one of the expectations of my Stanford graduate program, is that you take multiple internships. So really showing that I've researched there some great companies that I would love to work for. The next paragraph is now going to go into very specific units and professors that I want to work with. And I think this is really valuable, that you do your research, that you try and find the unit search engines for your given university. Particularly for Stanford, you can find these units, figure out what they're about and the professors that are teaching them, and try and connect that to your ambitions. So I'll show you what I did. Combining this experience with invaluable design coursework units such as Core Mechanics for Learning with Professor Christian Blair and Design in Under-Resourced Communities at the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design will allow me to gain a comprehensive understanding of design principles, learning theories, and frameworks, and how to use them to design education resources that are more inclusive for a wider range of student abilities. So that's really what I was interested in my studies, which is how do I design resources that are a lot more equity responsive and inclusive for students from all backgrounds. It's easy to design something that for people from the same demographic as you, but how do you design it for someone who has had a completely different upbringing from you? And that's what I was interested in. For developing my life education curriculum, I am eager to learn from curriculum studies expert Professor Denise Pope in her unit, Curriculum Construction. With her strong entrepreneurial and research background in curriculum development and student wellness, I will gain a comprehensive understanding of how to build a curriculum grounded in design principles and how to use needs finding, interviewing, prototyping, and efficacy research to ensure the curriculum is suited for marginalized Australian students. By pairing this with an internship at the Stanford Center on Adolescence, I will have the opportunity to research and develop high-quality social-emotional resources for students across the globe, an experience that will be invaluable for informing the social-emotional content of my life education curriculum. So again, tying it to the internships, if you're looking to research into professors, I would highly recommend just looking at the units they're teaching, then look at their bios on the Stanford website, but then also go have a look at LinkedIn, see where they've worked, what is their background, and try and find professors that you're genuinely interested in learning from. And I was really interested in learning from those professors. Okay, getting towards the end of the statement, just 2 more paragraphs to go. I think it's really important that you talk about what you're going to gain beyond the classroom. So you've got to do this all very concisely. What are you going to gain from the program? But then how are you going to take advantage of opportunities outside the classroom? And so that's what this next paragraph is focused on. Beyond the classroom, the opportunities to explore my passions for entrepreneurship and design at Stanford GSE are unrivaled. From developing my ideas at the Stanford Venture Studio to prototyping innovations in the Makers Lab, Stanford is the perfect place for exploring my love for edtech, entrepreneurship, and social impact. Above all else, the opportunity to form lifelong friendships and gain feedback from a diverse LDT cohort with backgrounds in design, engineering, computer science, and education will allow me to continue shaping my edtech initiatives to ensure they have the greatest impact on students across Australia. So again, do your research into the types of things you want to get involved in at Stanford. Look at the Stanford clubs. Always look for their entrepreneurial studios. I would say even ask ChatGPT. They're usually pretty good at finding, you can say, these are my interests, what kind of clubs are available at Stanford. It'll usually give you a list. Some of them might be outdated, but it will give you somewhere to start. And just do your research into the clubs, find the ones that align with your interests, and then plug and play. Okay, now just a little conclusion, tying it back to the impact and what it would mean to attend this graduate school. Whilst I cannot change Australia's education system alone, I believe that through the groundbreaking nature of my 2 EdTech initiatives, I can make a significant difference in the lives of millions of young Australians each year. It is the unique combination of the personalised program structure, world-leading EdTech professors, and incredible on-campus opportunities that make studying LDT at Stanford GSE the best place in the world to empower me to achieve these EdTech ambitions and transform the lives of millions of young Australians. So that's my statement of purpose. 1,000 words you get, and you've got to cover a whole lot. You've got to cover your personal life, your professional experiences, your ambitions, the Stanford coursework, the professors you want to reach out to, the internships you want to take, the opportunities beyond the classroom, and then rounding it out with an overall impact statement of the impact you're going to leave in your lifetime. So all those things you've got to accomplish, that's just an example of a structure you could use to achieve that for your own personal statement. So yeah, hopefully that gives you some ideas there. Now let's just jump onto the supplementals. Okay, so now I want to go onto the contribution to community question. It's very common across all the applications you're going to do for any school that you apply for. I had to do it for Harvard, Stanford, Penn, and Columbia. They all had that form of an expectation, which is not only what are you going to take from the community, but what are you going to give back to the community? And hopefully through just covering this, you will gain some ideas of how you can shape your contribution to community. I think you should tie it back to your expertise in a specific field, tie it back to potentially your passion if you're highly extroverted, talk about contributing to classroom discussions, forming friendships, maybe talk about the clubs you'd like to start, leadership positions you want to join, sporting communities you want to be a part of, all of that stuff. But it should tie back to the things that you genuinely have strengths in or the things that you genuinely want to contribute. So I'll share this one. 500 words is a lot to discuss contributions to community. A lot of the other schools only allow 250 to 300 words. So Keep that in the back of your mind if you're not applying to Stanford specifically. As a young, ambitious Australian who has developed innovative solutions to provide tens of thousands of marginalised young Australians with access to more equitable and holistic education opportunities, I believe I can contribute immensely to the Stanford GSE community and mission. I see myself doing this by sharing my deep understanding of Australia's education system, creating culturally inclusive environments for my fellow international students, joining positions of student leadership, and forming enduring partnerships with Stanford GSE EdTech entrepreneurs that will expand education opportunities for millions of students across the globe. So that whole paragraph is 2 sentences, and in hindsight, I definitely should have cut that up a little bit more. Luckily, I used semicolons to break it up a little bit, but definitely in hindsight, a big verbose paragraph that could be condensed. All right, now let's go into the specifics. I've outlined how I want to contribute, and now I'm going to outline the ways in which I'm going to achieve the 4 contributions that I've stated. Over the last 5 years, I have dedicated myself to co-founding one of Australia's largest edtech non-for-profits, conducting graduate school research into mental health and leading 6 educational book publications. As a result of these efforts, I have developed a deep understanding of Australia's education system, its current failings, and the opportunities to create meaningful change. Therefore, I plan to continuously share my perspectives about how Australia's education system marginalises specific students and how I've developed unique edtech innovations to disrupt these inequalities. By sharing this unique Australian perspective, I hope to enrich the Stanford GSE community with a deeper understanding of Australia's education system and innovative ideas of how they can address inequalities in their home education systems. Again, in hindsight, this really feels like it's still about me, just reading it back 2 months later. So I would probably say make it more focused on the actual community itself and less kind of selfish. But this is just what I submitted at the time. That's just a reflection in hindsight. Additionally, as an international student who has traveled the world for the sport of Ninja Warrior, I empathize with the challenges of living away from home. To help foster a strong community for the international students, I plan to host cultural dinners and workshops that celebrate the richness of our diverse backgrounds. Since 35% of the students at Stanford GSE are international, I also plan to join positions of student leadership to increase international representation. My focus will be on expanding opportunities for student collaboration, particularly those that help students form global entrepreneurial collaborations and research partnerships that will expand education opportunities for millions of learners everywhere. Okay, so that paragraph was centered around contributing to the international student representation. Again, this all feels very verbose. I think because I had 500 words to play with, I really decided to use all 500 words. And in hindsight, I probably could have cut this down easily to 400 words and made it more concise and nice for the reader. But anyway, next paragraph. Finally, as an entrepreneur and edtech leader at heart, I plan to make a distinct contribution to Stanford University by joining the Stanford Venture Studio and forming enduring partnerships with my fellow edtech non-for-profit founders. As our Elucidate education platform already supports more than 59,000 students across the globe each year, this presents a promising opportunity to establish meaningful partnerships with edtech non-for-profit founders at Stanford. Together, we can share our education technologies, resources, and networks to expand the impact of our non-for-profits to hundreds of thousands of additional students across the globe. So that's my next paragraph. Again, establishing bilateral partnerships is always a great one, particularly if you're from an international background. I think that's the goal of a lot of people going to these schools in the US is you want to build those types of partnerships that are going to benefit both charities or both companies. And then we just got one kind of final concluding paragraph. As a result of my unwavering dedication towards expanding education opportunities for marginalized Australian students and my desire to form lifelong friendships and partnerships with my fellow students, I believe I will make an immense contribution to Stanford GSE and its diverse community of education leaders. I don't know if it's just because it's my application. I'm not the biggest fan of that answer that I've given, that contribution to community one. I'm a much bigger fan of the ones that I wrote for like Harvard and Columbia. I think those were really solid ones. So for the next few videos, I am going to cover those and show you how to write perhaps a more concise one and one that's a little bit better. But yeah, that's just my own point of criticism. Use that as a foundation and build upon it to build a better answer than what I did, to be honest. Okay, These last two questions are, again, very generic, very generalized to a lot of programs. What is your ideal program going to look like? And what intrigues you about your field of study? So I'm going to go through both of those. You only get 1,000 characters for these, which is good because it means you have to be concise. It does make it difficult, but there's always a way to achieve it within that word limit. So let's go into those. So the first one's about what would my ideal program look like. In envisioning my ideal MS program, I see a vibrant LDT cohort who are diverse rather than uniform, collaborative rather than competitive, and committed to using digital tools to address the issues facing education systems across the globe. I see my ideal program being a choose-your-own-adventure experience, where I can deeply explore my two EdTech ambitions through personalized coursework, a year-long master's project, and the opportunity to intern at a world-leading education institution such as Khan Academy or the Stanford Center on Adolescence. In my ideal program, I also see a world-renowned faculty that actively helps students achieve their educational goals by being generous with their time and feedback. Above all else, I envision a program that allows me to explore new pursuits such as artificial intelligence and the gamification of learning, and work with my cohort to form long-term collaborations that will transform the lives of marginalized students across the globe. Again, in hindsight, if I had to make a criticism to this, it does still feel quite generic, but I think I personally struggled with the 1,000 character word limit, which is it's hard to be specific when you've only got 1,000 characters to achieve it. So again, use this as a form of inspiration, use it as a building block to craft a better answer for your graduate school. Okay, the final one is, why are you passionate about your field? My specific question was, what intrigues you about the design of digital tools for learning, aka just education technology? But they're essentially just asking you, why are you passionate about what you do? Why does this field matter? And so I'll just quickly touch on my reason. Again, you only have 1,000 characters, so you can't really state more than like one or two reasons as to why it really matters to you. During my undergraduate studies, I managed a non-for-profit called Ignite Mentoring, which taught critical social emotional skills to students from Perth's low socioeconomic schools. Whilst I cherished our program's one-on-one approach, we required more than 170 university student volunteers to reach just 1,000 students per year. In comparison, my EdTech non-for-profit Elucidate Education has been able to impact more than 100,000 students with 55 volunteers through the transformative power of digital learning tools. With my background in mechanical engineering, I love the idea that I can spend months designing a digital tool that unlocks an Australian student's love for learning and simultaneously addresses some of our nation's most complex issues such as education inequity and mental health. I am fascinated by the rapid pace at which EdTech is evolving and how it will play a central role in obliterating education inequalities in Australia and across the globe. I actually really like that answer. That is the reason why I like EdTech, is because I was originally managing a non-for-profit and I realized how ineffective it was because it's a service-based non-for-profit rather than a product-based non-for-profit. And that's why I became intrigued in writing textbooks and trying to create digital learning resources, because they allow for a much larger scale of impact from only one person or a handful of people. So that's my Stanford application. That's what I did to get into my program that is arguably the most competitive EdTech program in the world, just because a lot of people from STEM backgrounds really want to go to Stanford because it really is such an amazing school. And yeah, so I'm going to be making a lot more videos in the weeks to come about all the scholarships, just trying to be as super transparent as I can about this process. Coming from Perth, Western Australia, I just want to make it easier for people out there because I know how difficult it is to go through this journey and to get into these schools. So yeah, I'm not leaving until July to go study at Harvard, so I'm just going to be doing this for a little while. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see more of this, and I'll see you in the next one.